I have blood on my hands. Not the metaphorical kind that keeps you up for a few hours at night, but the heavy, freezing, salt-stained weight of 1,500 souls dragging me down into the abyss. I am a murderer, yet history remembers me as a victim. I remember the exact moment the timeline fractured. It wasn't with a bang, or a flash of lightning, or some grand cosmic shifting of the stars. It happened with the turn of a wrench and a desperate, misguided desire to play God. My name is Arthur, and I am a historian. I spent my entire life obsessing over the night of April 14th, 1912. I memorized every rivet count, every passenger name, every agonizing minute of the sinking of the RMS Titanic. I thought I understood the tragedy. I thought I knew exactly what went wrong. But when I was given the impossible chance access to a localized experimental temporal displacement unit, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the laws of physics or the fragility of time. I only thought about them. The families, the children in steerage, the frozen bodies bobbing in the North Atlantic. I went back to save them. I went back to stop the ship from hitting that iceberg. I had the knowledge, the dates, and the conviction of a man on a holy crusade. But as I sit here now, an old man looking at a faded photograph from a century ago, I realize the cruelest joke the universe ever played. The Titanic didn't sink because of bad luck. It didn't sink because of a sleeping lookout or a missing binocular key. It sank because of me. The transition was nauseating, a feeling like being pulled inside out through a straw. But then the smell hit me. That's what the history books never capture. The smell. Southampton in 1912 smelled of wet wool, burning coal, unwashed bodies, and the sharp, briny tang of the ocean. I stood on the dock on April 10th, watching the Leviathan rise above the skyline. The Titanic, she was more beautiful and more terrifying than any black and white reel could ever convey. She looked invincible. A mountain of steel forged by human arrogance. I knew her fate, and that knowledge burned in my chest like a fever. One had to get on board. A passenger ticket was out of the question. I had no currency that would pass inspection and no papers. But a ship that size always needed muscle. It needed fodder for the furnaces. I managed to bribe a dockmaster with a silver pocket watch I'd brought from the future and antique to me, but brand new to Himan, secured a spot in the glorious hell of the boiler rooms. I became a trimmer, then a fireman. My plan was crude, but statistically sound. I didn't need to hijack the bridge. I just needed to slow her down. If the Titanic arrived at the coordinate 4143 on 4,956 feet, WE even 20 minutes late, the iceberg would have drifted past the fatal intersection. Speed was the enemy. My mission was to sabotage the engines just enough to force a reduction in knots without causing a panic. Down in the bowels of the ship, the heat was a physical weight. It pressed against your eyes and filled your lungs with soot. We worked in rhythmic agony, shoveling coal into the roaring maws of the boilers. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of metal and fire. For 2 days, I played the part. I shoveled until my hands blistered and bled, blending in with the Irish and British laborers who had no idea they were fueling their own coffins. But as April 14th approached, the anxiety began to tear me apart. We were making good time. Too good. Captain Smith, under pressure from Bruce's May, was pushing the engines. We were approaching the ice field, and the ship was tearing through the water like a missile. On the afternoon of the 14th, Primera ma de mai move. I waited until the shift change, slipping away into the maintenance corridors behind Boiler Room 6. I found the pressure couplings for the port engine. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the heavy iron wrench I'd stolen. I didn't want to destroy the ship. I just wanted to cause a pressure leak. Something that would force the engineers to shut down one of the screws for repairs. A drop of 5 knots, that's all I needed to save everyone. I was tightening the clamp to strip the thread when a voice boomed behind me. It was the leading fireman, Barrett. He thought I was an anarchist or a madman trying to blow us all to hell. He lunged it. We struggled in the cramped, steam-filled darkness. I screamed at him that I was trying to save us, that there was ice ahead. But he just saw a saboteur. In the chaos of the fight, the heavy wrench flew from my grip and smashed into a high-pressure steam regulator. The sound was like a gunshot, followed instantly by the scream of escaping vapor. It wasn't a catastrophic explosion, not enough to sink a ship, but it was violent. A massive plume of white, superheated steam vented upwards, surging through the ventilation shafts and pouring out onto the forward deck. I was subdued, beaten half unconscious, and dragged to the brig deep in the ship's hold. But the real damage, odd being, it wasn't to the engine. It was to the timeline. The steam release created a dense, artificial fog that lingered around the forward mast for nearly an hour, dissipating slowly in the freezing, calm air. This was the critical hour. Up in the crow's nest, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were squinting into the darkness. In the original history, they saw the haze of the iceberg too late. In this new version, one had created the lingering steam from my sabotage mixed with the atmospheric conditions, creating a momentary blind spot right at the horizon line. A white wall against a black sea. Worse still was the human reaction. Captain Smith was furious. He was told a crewman had attempted to damage the propulsion systems. He saw it as an act of mutiny, a challenge to his command and the ship's integrity. Instead of maintaining speed, he ordered a slight increase, a defiant gesture to prove that the Titanic could not be hobbled by acts of vandalism. He wanted to make up for the few minutes lost during the confusion in the boiler room. His arrogance was inflamed by my interference. I sat in the darkness of the brig, nursing a broken nose, feeling the vibrations of the ship intensify. It was faster. We were going faster. I checked my mechanical watch, 11:39 p.m. It was happening. I felt the shift in the floor before I heard it. The turn. The ship banked hard to port. In the history I studied, the Titanic struck the iceberg on its starboard side, a glancing blow that unzipped 5 compartments. If they had hit it head-on, the ship would have survived. If they had turned 30 seconds earlier, they would have missed it. But as I lay there, feeling the shudder of impact, I realized the timing was wrong. The collision happened 10 seconds later than the history book said. 10 seconds. Because of the steam obscuring the view, because of the increased speed ordered by the captain, the ship had turned, but not enough. The delay meant the iceberg didn't just scrape the side. It tore a wider, deeper gash further back along the hull, compromising the structural integrity in a way that accelerated the flooding. The math in my head turned cold. I hadn't stopped the disaster. I had optimized it. Somehow, in the chaos that followed, I was forgotten in the brig. As the water rose, the door buckled, and I managed to force my way out into the rising nightmare. The scene on the deck was exactly as I had read, but infinitely worse in color. The orchestra played, but the music was drowned out by the screaming of steam and the wailing of the dying. I saw the lifeboats leaving half empty. I saw the desperation in the eyes of men who knew they were already ghosts. I didn't deserve to survive. I wanted to stay, to go down with the ship I had doomed. But the instinct for self-preservation is a treacherous thing. I found myself near Collapsible B, the overturned boat. I was pulled aboard, shivering, watching the great lights of the Titanic tilt toward the heavens. I watched the stern rise. I watched the lights flicker and die, and then came the sound of 46,000 tons of steel tearing itself apart. It was a death rattle that I had orchestrated. As we drifted in the freezing dark, surrounded by the silence of 1,500 frozen voices, I realized the full extent of the paradox. If I hadn't come back, the lookouts might have seen the berg seconds earlier. The ship might have been going just a fraction slower. They might have hit it differently. They might have lived. I sat in that lifeboat, huddled under a rough blanket, weeping not for my survival, but for my guilt. I was the variable that solved the equation of their death. The recovery ship, the Carpathia, eventually came. I blended in with the survivors, a mute, traumatized fireman who had lost his mind. When I finally returned to the present, using the recall beacon implanted in my spine, I didn't return as a hero. I returned as a ghost. I walked straight to the archives, my hands trembling as I pulled the microfiche for the Daily Mirror, dated April 16, 1912. And there it was, a photo of a group of survivors on the deck of the Carpathia, and in the background, staring directly into the lens with hollow, haunted eyes, was me. The caption didn't name me. It didn't need to. The universe knew. I looked at my own face across the chasm of a century, and I saw the truth. The tragedy of the Titanic wasn't an accident. It was a closed loop. I went back to stop it, and by being there, I ensured it happened exactly as it was meant to. The ice didn't kill them. The arrogance didn't kill them. I did. The past is a heavy door that should never be opened. We think we can fix things, that we can undo the pain, but sometimes the scar is the only thing holding the body together. If you had the chance to go back and change one event in history, knowing now that your interference could make it worse, would you still take the risk? Or would you let fate take its course? I need to know what you would do. Tell me your choice in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story chilled you to the bone, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. There are more stories from the dark corners of time waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss the next truth we uncover.